Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at this webinar where we share about investment opportunities in the digital economy and how you can participate in them with several exciting ETFs. We have our speaker today, Tan Terchin, with us to speak about this topic. Terchin is a senior equity analyst from our FS Stocks and ETFs research team, and he provides analysis and research coverage of both stocks and ETFs listed on the Singapore, Hong Kong, and US markets. The global technology and semiconductor sectors in particular are his areas of interest and expertise. So without further ado, Terchin, please.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Terchin. I'm an analyst here at FSM1. The topic for today's webinar is on the digital economy and the different ways you can invest in it. So during this presentation, I will cover a few segments of the digital economy and highlight 4 ETFs which you can invest in. So those of you who are looking for fresh ideas for your portfolios can consider a small allocation to them. So without further ado, let's begin today's webinar with a short introduction to the digital economy. So the world as we know it has become increasingly tech-driven. So not only has technology revolutionized the way we live, the way we work, and it has also dramatically changed the way that we interact with one another, consume goods and services, and even entertainment. So there's no doubt that technology today has become an indispensable part of our lives, and it is one that is hard to live without. And as it continues to drive massive transformations and disruptions in the coming year, the global economy itself is becoming increasingly digitalized as well. So what exactly is a digital economy? So it is basically a massive web of interconnected stakeholders and supply chains covering all digital products and services which are enabled by the internet and other digital technologies. Now, while there's a lack of an industry classification system for the digital economy at the moment, because of its complex nature, the digital economy can be broadly categorized into the following 8 categories. So first, we have e-commerce. So the e-commerce boom has fundamentally transformed the way people shop for physical goods, with online retailers like Amazon and Alibaba having an outsized impact on the broader retail market, forcing traditional brick and mortar retailers to innovate and reinvent their businesses in this digital era. So next, we have e-services. So the use of internet and mobile phones has allowed online commerce to extend beyond physical goods to online services, triggering a flourishing e-services industry segment that includes things like your online food delivery, sale of event tickets, and even dating services. So next we have e-travel. So for the e-travel segment, it consists mainly of online mobility services such as online car rental, your ride-hailing, carpooling, so on and so forth. So this is this industry has been heavily disrupted by digital business models over the years, with the industry experiencing a paradigm shift to online bookings, and following which we have digital media. So the past decade has brought about massive changes in the way people consume entertainment. So from Netflix to Spotify, consumers are increasingly switching to online streaming services. Next, we have fintech. So for the fintech segment of the digital economy, fintech it is mainly propelled by digital payments, which has been surging in the recent few years. So while other digital financial services such as remittance, robo-advisors are still at a nascent stage, they are expected to see promising growth in the future and remain untapped opportunities in the digital finance space. So moving on, we have digital advertising. So because consumers are spending increasing amounts of time on the internet compared to traditional media, engaging with consumers is no longer the same as before. So for firms that are looking to advertise their products, digital advertising is almost a necessity to maintain a strong presence. So moving on, we have cloud services. So cloud services provides the hardware and the software components that are needed to support data storage, computing, networking, and as well as other requirements of a business. So as companies begin to migrate a greater portion of their workloads onto the cloud computing industry is set to see explosive growth ahead, rendering traditional in-house and off-premises data warehouses obsolete. So lastly, we have cybersecurity. So with a growing amount of data being transmitted through the internet, there is also an increasing demand for cybersecurity solutions to protect networks, computers, and data from unauthorized access. So data breaches are far from being uncommon in the digital space, and can be extremely costly for the affected companies. So examples would be the Cambridge Analytica scandal that Facebook suffered. So collectively, these 8 segments of the digital economy are worth approximately $9.5 trillion US dollars today. So if you think about it in terms of GDP, that's approximately 10% of the world's GDP. And if you were to think about the digital economy as a national economy, then the digital economy would actually be the 3rd largest economy in the world, behind only US and China. So now that we have a better understanding of what makes up the digital economy, let's talk about some of the mega trends that has contributed to its rise and the investment opportunities that are associated with it. So the 3 mega trends that we will be discussing today are the digitalization of consumption, the shift towards cloud computing, and the smart revolution. Okay, so let's start with our first mega trend, which is the digitalization of consumption. So not only is global consumption growing, consumption habits have become increasingly digitalized, where people are more willing to pay for the convenience of on-demand services, such as food delivery, ride-hailing, online shopping, so on and so forth. So I'm sure that many of you have also been very acquainted with some of these services during this circuit breaker period. So this change in consumer habits gives rise to many opportunities for companies that are able to cater to them. So take e-commerce, for example. In 2019, worldwide e-commerce sales actually hit a record high of 3.5 trillion US dollars. Not surprisingly, the majority of which comes from China, which is currently the largest e-commerce market in the entire world. So key players in China include companies like Alibaba, JD.com, and Pinduoduo. And in fact, these 3 companies, they collectively control 80% of China's e-commerce market. So if you look over to the West, the US is actually the 2nd largest e-commerce market in the world. So over there, Amazon actually dominates the market with a 50% market share. And it is estimated that by the year 2023, the e-commerce market is set to become a 6.5 trillion US dollar market. And if you do the math, it actually works out to a compound annual growth rate of about 17%. So the rising consumption around the world is a sign that consumer confidence remains robust, especially in countries like China. So in China, there's actually no better indicator of consumer confidence than Singles' Day sales, which is the largest shopping event of the year. So in 2019, Single Day sales in China was actually twice the amount accumulated for Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. So please don't forget that this is actually even amid the US-China trade war as well as slowing economic growth. So besides e-commerce, the consumption of online services in China is also expected to grow quickly, making up 24% of the total service consumption by the year 2023. And if you didn't know, China is actually home to the largest food delivery market in the entire world, which is nearly twice the size of the US, as you can see from the chart over here. And I've included Singapore's food delivery market, and you can see at just 400 million, it really pales in comparison to the other large countries like China, US, and India. So now moving on, there are a couple of reasons why the online consumer market in China is booming. So first of all, with greater economic progress, China's population is getting wealthier each year. And that's not just for the urban citizens, but for the rural population as well. So as you can see from the chart, disposable income for both groups are at an all-time high, which means that people have more money to spend on discretionary spending. So secondly, China actually has a huge number of internet users. So even though China's internet penetration rate stands at approximately 61% today, it already has more than 850 million internet users. And if you think about it, 850 million, it is actually greater than the total population of every other country in the world, with the exception of India. And as China transits into a digital economy, we believe that, and penetration rates rise, we believe that many of these Chinese internet companies, they do have plenty of room for further growth. So here's a graphic for you to get a sense of how large China's internet space is. So as you can see, for the various segments, although China actually loses out in terms of penetration rates, but the thing is, they actually have much more internet users than compared to the US. So one area where China actually really excels in is actually in the mobile payment space. So as you can see, China has a penetration rate for mobile payments at about 37% compared to only 15% for the US. So this is because China essentially, they just skipped the entire credit card era, going from cash all the way to mobile payments. So in the future, if you're planning a trip to China, I would say please get acquainted with some of the digital payment services that they have, WeChat Pay, Alipay, as I think most places there would accept mobile payments over credit cards. Now moving on, let's talk about the growth in number of internet users. So we think that the growth in the number of internet users in China, it will be contributed by two groups. We have your millennials and the rural population. So let's talk about the millennials first. So millennials in China, there are roughly 350 million of them, which makes up about 25% of the total population. So many of these millennials, they are brought up in an era where they are constantly exposed to technology and have grown to become avid internet users. So for the audience out there who have kids around this age, I think you know what I'm talking about. If you bring them out to eat or something, their eyes will always be glued to their smartphones, and when they're at home, they will always be watching the TV or the computer. Whatever it is, their eyes are always glued to some screen. But the good news is, these millennials in China, they actually contributed to 2/3 of the total online consumption growth last year. And with their higher spending power and their larger propensity to spend, millennials are progressively becoming China's largest source of online consumers. So besides the millennials, we have China's rural population of roughly 650 million is another huge untapped market for internet companies. So compared to the urban region where penetration rates are around around 70%, it's around 70%. The penetration rate in rural China is actually far lower at about 40%. So one nice thing is that the government is actually pushing some of the big telco players to speed up the construction of internet infrastructure in the rural region so that the rural population does not get left behind in the digitalization wave. So the rising number of internet users from the rural regions will present Chinese tech companies with a new set of growth opportunities. Okay, so with a growing number of internet users and their increasingly digitalized consumption habits, we have no doubt that Chinese tech companies will have plenty of room for further growth. So investors who would like to invest in China's digital economy can actually do so using this ETF called the Invesco China Technology ETF. So this ETF is actually listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker CQQQ. So it is designed to track the performance of a basket of Chinese tech companies. So as you can see, top holdings include names like Meituan, which is actually your largest food delivery platform in China, and also Tencent, which is the creator of WeChat, the super app WeChat. So this ETF also has an expense ratio of about 0.7%, and we think that it is a simple way that investors can actually get diversified exposure to a portfolio of Chinese tech companies at low cost. So if you like some exposure to Chinese tech companies, we think that you can consider this ETF. Now, besides consumption, another mega trend that has contributed to the rise of the digital economy is actually the shift towards cloud computing. So cloud computing refers to the delivery of computing services such as processing power, storage, and software applications across the internet. So unlike your traditional IT infrastructure, cloud computing differs by hosting everything on the cloud, which is off-premises. So in the past, companies had to purchase, install, operate, and even maintain their own hardware and software. And this actually takes up a lot of time and effort and also money. So with cloud computing, companies essentially rent access to a variety of services which is made available by the cloud service provider, and they actually pay a fee based on what they use. So the invention of cloud computing actually actually removes the burden of maintaining IT systems, which frees up precious time and money that can be used in growing the core business of the company. So here's a look at the various cloud service models in the cloud computing industry. So right at the top, we have infrastructure as a service. So this is where third-party providers deliver infrastructure services such as your data centers, servers, storage, and things like that over the internet. So here, users can install their own operating system and applications. And companies that dabble in this space include companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. So for the second model, we have what we call the platform as a service model. So this is a model that actually builds on the infrastructure as a service model. And over here, it includes things like your middleware, your operating system, development tools, so on and so forth. And similar to the infrastructure as a service, companies that operate in this space include include companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And last but not least, we have the third model, which is the software as a service model. So I think this is a model that most of us are familiar with. So in this model, third-party providers host their applications or their software onto the cloud, and users can connect to them via the internet. So most of your mobile phone apps, your Microsoft 365, they are actually considered software as a service. So examples of companies that operate in this area would include things like Salesforce, Adobe, Microsoft. So now let's talk about why we are so positive on the cloud computing industry. So in today's world, oil is no longer the most valuable commodity. Data is. So we live in a world where big data is generated by every digital process. So in fact, in 2019, 41 zettabytes of data was generated, which is equivalent to 820 billion Blu-ray discs, and that's a lot. So the deep insight and knowledge that can be extracted from raw data analytics is hugely valuable. So e-commerce companies, for example, they collect data to gain a deeper understanding of consumer preferences and shopping behaviors, and which enables them to make more personalized product recommendations to improve the overall online shopping experience. And digital advertising companies, on the other hand, they collect data on internet users, they analyze search terms and user habits to place targeted advertising alongside regular search results. So given the vast amount of data that is being generated each day and the limitations on traditional storage solutions, cloud services have been gaining traction quickly, so much so that the industry revenue is forecasted to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 16% from now till 2022. So right now, the cloud services market, it is actually dominated by what we call the big three players, and these are Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. So out of the three, Amazon actually takes the lion's share at about with a 33% market share. So if you notice, none of these three companies, they actually started out as a pure cloud computing company. So Amazon, it actually started out by selling books on the internet and gradually moved on to other items. And Google, of course, started off as a search engine. And Microsoft is best known for its software like its Windows OS and Microsoft 365. So over the years, these companies have actually slowly pivoted their businesses towards the cloud, towards cloud services, as they all saw tremendous opportunities there. So as of late, there has also been a rise in the number of SaaS companies due to the growing popularity of cloud-based distribution model. So not only are there more new SaaS players coming into the market, such as Zoom, Slack, for example, some of the recent high-profile IPOs, existing software companies have also been transitioning from the traditional software distribution model to the SaaS model. So take Microsoft, for example. So Microsoft in the past, it used to sell most of its software through a single package license. But today, actually, most of Microsoft sales, software sales actually comes from a subscription-based model. Now, so if you like the idea of cloud computing and you would like to start to get some exposure to companies in this industry, you can consider this first trust cloud computing ETF. So similar to the first ETF, this ETF is also listed in the United States under the ticker SKYY. So this ETF actually tracks the performance of a basket of companies that are involved in the cloud computing industries. So to be eligible for the index, constituents must meet certain criteria such as minimum market cap, free float, and average daily volume. So the top 10 holdings of this ETF include the big three cloud service providers that I mentioned earlier, which is Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Now moving on, the third and final mega trend which we will discuss today is the smart revolution. So all the latest gadgets and technology that we have today, like the smartphones, self-driving cars, cloud computing, they all share one thing in common, and that is they are all enabled by semiconductors. So in fact, semiconductors are essential components of all electronic products. Without advancements in semiconductor technology, technological innovations in general would simply stop. So this is why we think that the semiconductor industry is so important to the progress of the entire digital economy. So those of you who are unfamiliar, in the semiconductor industry, there are three main types of companies. So first of all, you have your pure play foundries. So these are companies that do not have any design capabilities, as they focus only on the manufacturing and the testing of semiconductor products. So examples of companies in this space would be TSMC, which is the largest foundry in the world. Next, on the other end of the spectrum, you have what we call fabless companies. So fabless companies, they do the exact opposite. They are involved only in the design and sale of semiconductor products, while outsourcing the fabrication to foundries. So the nice thing about this foundry and fabless model is that fabless players can actually save on fixed costs, because building a fab it is not cheap, and costs can run into the billions of dollars for a modern day fabrication plant. So by outsourcing the fabrication to a foundry, these fabless companies, they can actually spend more money on research and development, producing faster, more cutting edge chips. So last but not least, we have what we call the integrated device manufacturers. So basically, these are companies that do both. Meaning they design and they fabricate semiconductor products. So as of 2019, US companies still control the majority of the semiconductor market, with a market share of nearly 50%, as you can see from the chart on the right. So this is actually the result of hundreds of billions of dollars spent on R&D over the years. So China, on the other hand, only holds a market share of about 5%, but it has laid out big plans to close the gap. So part of its Made in China 2025 plan is to be self-sufficient when it comes to semiconductors. So the ongoing trade war has revealed just how vulnerable China is when it comes to semiconductors, as bans on Huawei and ZTE over the past few years had a significant impact on their operations. So the intensifying competition for dominance in the semiconductor industry just goes to show how important semiconductors are to a nation's progress. Now let's have a look at some of a few of the emerging technologies which we believe will drive semiconductor demand in the near term. So first we have the development of 5G. So hardware such as smartphones, base stations will have to be upgraded in order to be 5G ready. So if you have a 4G phone running on a 5G network, you won't be able to enjoy the full benefits of faster speeds, lower latencies, things like that. So intuitively, more hardware upgrades would mean higher demand for semiconductors. Next, we have the increasing smartphone penetration rates, especially in developing countries. So three of the most populous countries in the world, China, India, and Indonesia, they have an average smartphone penetration rate of about 38%, which is far lower than the developed average of about 90+%. And we think that as smartphone penetration rates increase, similarly, demand for semiconductors will go up as well. And last but not least, we have the Internet of Things. So right now, it is estimated that there will be 75 billion connected devices by 2025, which is a threefold increase from 2019. And similarly, all these devices will require cutting-edge chips. So some of you might have concerns about investing in the semiconductor industry, as it is known to be cyclical, as you can see from the chart over here. So there are times where sales growth, which is denoted by the green line, can tumble by more than 30%, bringing share prices down, as we have experienced during the 2008 GFC, as well as the 2001 dot-com bubble. So by given time, it eventually recovers to higher levels than before, and so do share prices. So this is because as the world becomes increasingly digitalized, the demand for semiconductors, it will always be there. So thus, it is not a question if a recovery will occur, but rather we think it's a question of when the recovery will occur. So this slide over here pretty much sums up what I just said, and that is without semiconductors, all the technology that we have today would simply not exist, and that is one of the main reasons why we are so positive on the semiconductor industry. And for investors who would like to get a piece of the action, you can do so using our recommended ETF, which is the Vector Semiconductor ETF. So this ETF actually tracks the performance of a basket of companies which are involved in semiconductor production and equipment production. This ETF, it uses a modified market cap weighting, and it favors the largest and most liquid companies which are listed in the US. So top holdings include companies like TSMC, the largest foundry in the world, Intel, Nvidia. I believe many of these names here are familiar to many of you. And on top of that, this ETF also has a low expense ratio of just 0.35%. Now, moving on, before I talk about the fourth and final ETF, I would like to share a few thoughts on COVID-19 and the impact it has had on the digital economy. So there's no doubt that COVID-19 has actually caused a lot of stress in our lives, but I think at the same time, it has also revealed the importance of digital readiness. So over this period, the companies that have performed well are generally those from the internet sector, companies like Amazon, Alibaba, Zoom, so on and so forth. And the ones that don't do well, generally they don't really have a significant digital presence. So what I think is that the pandemic could force businesses and individuals to rethink the role of technology in their lives. And after this, I think that it is very possible that we see many companies actually speed up the adoption of new technologies. And that is not just to be ready for the next crisis, but it is also to be to allow them to remain competitive in the digitized world. Now, moving on to our fourth and final ETF. So if you want a product that really has it all, you can look no further than O-Shares Global Internet Giants ETF. So similarly, this ETF is listed in the US under the ticker OGIG. So this ETF actually tracks the performance of a basket of internet companies. So one of the conditions is that these companies that are included in this ETF, they actually have to derive the majority of their earnings from the internet. And these companies must also exhibit growth and quality factors. So in terms of country allocation, this ETF is a little special because it has a global allocation. So about 67% of the companies are from the US, 21% from China, and 12% from the rest of the world. And we think that for such global diversified exposure, its expense ratio of 0.48, we think that it is actually pretty reasonable. And if you're looking for one ETF for the entire digital economy, this is it. Now, moving on, I'd just like to share, before I end this webinar, I'd just like to share a few tools on FSM1, which we have that can help you in your ETF investing journey. So first of all, it is our 2020 ETF focus list. So our ETF focus list has actually been around since 2018. And just a couple of months back, we actually just released the 2020 edition. So what this ETF focus list does is that it identifies one ETF for each market and sector for investors. And like as you know, there are many ETFs out there. So how do you go about picking one that will give you suitable exposure? So what this ETF focus list can do for you is that if you are a new investor, you can take this as your starting point. And on top of that, if you are an experienced investor, you also can use the ETF focus list as a place for you to get new ideas. Secondly, we also have our ETF RSP, something that we have launched this year. And if you don't want to time the market, I think this is a great tool for you. And last but not least, I'm proud to say that FSM1 is actually one of the first brokers in Singapore to implement our own internal classification system for EIP and SIP ETFs. So we have, as you know, if you have not passed your CKA or CAR, you will not be allowed to purchase SIP ETFs. And actually, most of the ETFs that are listed on foreign exchanges, they are classified as SIP. So with our new with our new EIP classification, you can actually browse through a range of ETFs that are considered EIP on our platform. So the nice thing is actually some of the ETFs that are classified as EIP in our first batch, they actually come from, most of them actually come from our focus list. So chances are, if you see something that you like on our focus list, it will be classified, it should be classified as EIP. So, okay, I think that's about it. I've come to the end of this presentation already. So I hope that you have managed to gain some valuable insights from it. So during this period, I also hope that you can stay safe, stay healthy, and I wish you all the best for your investing journey. Thank you.